Hello, everybody. Denisse here. Welcome to our RED program review translation, not review, translation video. In this opportunity, we're going to be working with the material from RED 144, which corresponds to Lab 17 of 2025. This program was recorded on the 14th of September of 2025. Okay, so here we can see the lab, the whole lab, with the new configuration that Alejandra has recently explained of how everything is going to be working from now on, right? Today, I am recording this video on September 25th. So right now we're working with this specific space, right? From that specific space. So Alejandra begins by saying that year 2025 is a very important determination, and many things are at play. And between those things is the quality of the solar code, of course, which we can now announce that that the quality of the solar code, it is very, very good. So we can say that this is a very great beginning of Lab 17 in relation to everything that we have been seeing happening at the global scale. Logically, we need to have previous concepts to be able to process all of this, but we can sense it, we can feel it, okay? What Ale is referring to, of course, is to the recent situation that has been going on in Nepal, right? We know that humanly it is not very desirable where situations happens when there are deaths, where there are wounded people, where there is cruelty, where there is destructive capacity. But we must understand that from the symbolic scale, which is the one that possesses the base of the symbolic scale is the one that the base of society possesses, right? So from there, the expression of the limitations will not be elegant, okay? The expression of the limits is going to have these characteristics of forces of destruction. So in the social code, all these young people that began this situation in Nepal, we call them Gen Z, right? But in LGC, we know them as Apparatus 500 because clearly this is solar consciousness. It's not social consciousness, right? Because the social consciousness has this privilege of the symbolic scale. And in the symbolic scale, you only have whether you like it or you don't like it, right? And when the limit is placed by that basic scale of society, that limit is placed with I like it or I don't like it. So there is no other choices. So going out and destroying, going out and breaking and putting a stop to the government, showing them that violence is also part of that collective, and that collective setting those boundaries clearly and very determinedly is part of that social scale, right? So here we can see that Nepal, the telephonic code of Nepal is 977, right? So this is how Alejandra decodes this. She's saying orbital 7 is being updated by orbital 9. So because we can see that it is 977, the regulation that is going on is happening from orbital 9 to orbital 7. We know that orbital 9, which is Pluto, is no longer considered a planet. And the reason for this was because it didn't have a clean orbit. So what does this mean for us? It means that our solar code is infected by cosmic scales that alter the subatomic scale because it's not defined. It wasn't solarly defined, this subatomic scale, right? So these planets are called dwarf planets because they would be in another dimension, right? They would be in another frequency. So the fact that orbital 9 is not clean, it's a clear a sign that our solar system still has these vulnerabilities, okay? So when the code of the ionosphere of the Earth, what it's reproducing is 977, right, Nepal, what it's saying is that the capacity of the 9th orbital to set limits to the 7th orbital is moving, right? So instead of this situation happening from a political political stance, no, it's happening from a social stance, right? And here she explains. Politics would be a species of interface or middle situation, fourth plane, right? But the base is 11. So that is what we are looking at. The social scale took control of the situation, the civil scale. And in that civil scale, it's not just any generation. No, it is a very specific one. The one that picks up that digital signal, which is code 500, right? So in their social collective, they share one same occurrence, the modulation of the subatomic scale, and they are pulling this occurrence. So what this occurrence did, this collective occurrence that they picked up, was about going out and setting the boundary, right? But the thing is, the really interesting thing is that later they came out with the regulation, because they came out to clean everything and to fix everything they had destroyed. So 77 is consciousness, and the consciousness updates destroying, but the consciousness also updates reconstructing. And this is communitary, and it is from a social scale. It's not military, it's not political, it's not religious. It is the social scale, the one that shares this occurrence. Another thing we must understand is that it is not Gen C, the Gen C of the whole globe. No, the first Gen C that is setting the step for what is going on is in the scale of the subatomic scale, because we're talking about 977, right? Because subatomic scale is 789. So if the natives of the apparatuses 500s of that community are setting boundaries, destructive as the same way they're being destructive, they are also being constructive in a very spontaneous and civil way. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are before a solar code update, because when we are able to do this, it means that the infrastructure is functioning correctly. So this is like really, really good news, right? Like with all the, casualties, we're talking about something very good. So something else that happened some hours after this whole Nepal situation is that Russian drones invaded the aerial space of Poland, right? Why? What is happening to Russia? Why is it trying to invade Europe? Why is it not trying to invade Asia? This is because it knows that what it can dominate has to be frequentially lower. And what it cannot dominate and what it's trying to escape from is everything that is frequentially higher. That's why it's not trying to expand towards Asia, right? So if we look at Asia, ASIA, what is SI in LGC? We know that that is the center situation that the role of the architect takes, right? So ASIA, we're talking about the field of the architects operating in the context. That would be the official decodification of Asia, the field of the architects operating in the context. So what happens is that they are using the infrastructure of the base, and because that infrastructure is it has to do with the symbolic scale, or it has symbolic scale licenses, it will be reactive, it will be massive, but they will share occurrences. So we can destroy, but we can also reconstruct. And it is our social consciousness, the one that will be regulating that parameter. So all of these are really good news, because what they are doing is what Putin goes around saying, but they are actually doing it. So what is it that they're doing? Multipolarity. Multipolarity is that everybody's different, but they are all contributing to one singularity, right? The singularity is the territory of the unified field. But all of this is a particular activation of each person. So it's very likely that they didn't plan the reconstruction. It was probably very spontaneous, right? It wasn't planned. Why? Because antimatter and matter are connected, and this is solar code. So we are talking about the end for all of those external consciousness that like or used to manipulate the system. Because now it is Ri, the one that has the credit, and not Ro. So Ro doesn't have the credit, right? But it receives it from Ri. So it will either say check or no, not check. You won't get the credit or you will get the credit, right? So now what we're gonna see is how it all propagates, but it is activated. Alice, like it has been activated. This whole situation has been activated. Another really interesting thing that Alice says is that she went and explored the background of Nepal, right? And she found out that Nepal is the native land of Siddhartha Gautama, right? Why is she talking now about Siddhartha Gautama, right? This is because he is writing the symbolic language, meaning the negative of what is going to be revealed in the positive, right? In the new calendar, because Siddhartha Gautama and all of this situation happens before the Christ. So the reference that Alejandra takes is the year where Siddhartha Gautama dies, which is year 483 before the Christ. Why does she take the death? Because we are talking about an architect that is finishing his task. Wow. Okay, what is that task? Writing the negative of the symbolic scale. I'm getting the chills. Okay, so Siddhartha Gautama is it's a prince by nature. We're talking about the fourth plane, but he goes he leaves that that nature, that aristocratic nature. He goes into the civil life and goes through all of that evolutionary path, right? From the civil condition, from the base, not from his condition as a prince. So what is this writing, or what is this like inscribing? That the architects are gonna go and be in charge of the architecture, meaning that we are gonna be belonging and we're gonna be appearing in the unified field as civil architecture. Because this is all about going to the basic, going through all the scales of the basic, and from there executing the balance or the equilibrium, right? So Alejandra takes year 483 from the Christian era, right? We're talking about a regulatory principle because we have an 8 in the center and then we have 43. So 43 will be the law, or like we can say it is law because in Spanish 43 is ley, or the perception of the destiny that goes through a regulation, which is 8, right? So it doesn't really matter which is the specific day of the death of Siddhartha Gautama. It doesn't matter for her in this instance. Why? Because she is testing the solar code, and for this is an annual situation, right? So what is the point that is the most interesting for Alejandra? It is 118, the day 118, because it represents the social octave, right? The octave that regulates the base. Another thing is that the life cycle of Siddhartha Gautama was 80 years, right? Public octave. Well, it is exactly the public octave what he left inscribed in the negative. Okay, so Ale says, when I read the symbolic scale, I read the social scale, right? That's why they have all the credits they have, because they don't have this technical range of access. They come for a human experience, and the final result is whether I like it or I don't like it. They are never in charge of anything that has to do with the construction of that, right? But yes, with the construction, they are never in charge with the construction of that, but they are like they use that, but they don't construct it. Okay, so social scale is the same as symbolic scale. Okay, so we're going to that specific point of that specific year, which is April 28th of year 483 before Christ. So, which is solar day 176168. Why does Alejandra anchor there? Because she's taking Siddhartha Gautama's death as a precedent for our actual calendar. Okay, so she is seeing the inscription of these architects, Asia, right? These architects are writing to be able to mark within time, put into a time frame what we're looking at right now. Okay, so now she is looking at another specific position, which is day 8 of lab 18, which is the 7th of October of 2025, solar day 739533, which is day 280 of the year. Okay, so between the 28th of April, which is day 118 of year 483 before Christ, and the 7th of October of 2025, we have 563,365 days. Okay, what are we looking at? We have 33 in the center, then we have 66, and then we have 55 hugging everything. What are we talking about there? The collective memory unit is being administrated, and it's going to be consumed from the third orbital as much as from the infrastructure of the architect as from the infrastructure of the architecture. This is what she's trying to provide support for. Another thing is that on the 7th of October of 2025, the summation of the LGC calendar is 35775. If we read that from left to right, we can see Nepal's telephonic code, right? And we also have the 577 infrastructure. She explained this in event 60/1 in Greece. She spoke about 57, 577, and 577, right? And this also is related to the bandas etarias, right? What does that mean? It means that there is an architect of the consciousness that is projecting itself socially. And in the middle, there is nothing. There is no spiritual movement, no religious movement, no political movement, nothing. Okay, so going back to that specific point that she's referring to, which is day 8 of lab 18, right? What is lab 18? It is lab 7 of the other one. It is the value of someone else that isn't me. That is why lab 18 is so important. That's why we have those stolen days that happen between the Julian and the Gregorian calendar, because it has to do with the control of the consciousness of the other person who is not me. And that is the infection we have had to our solar code. It is just that right now we are within an update, because antimatter, in the antimatter, all of these things have been seen. But in the matter, these things have to be revealed. And we are very excited because we are going to be observing how the space-temporal structures accompany every part of the process. And you will end up understanding why Alejandra is like, you can insult me all you want, but do not touch the structure of the LGC calendar, because she is going to get angry there, because the LGC calendar is an instrument to balance matter with antimatter. It is many dimensions, the ones that are going to be utilizing all of this as their source for programming on top of 2012. That's why 2012 wasn't readable if you had a connection with the collective memory, because you're not going to find it in the collective memory. You're going to find it in the solar code, right? So the ones that observed the collective memory horizontally in 2012, it's the end of the world for them. Of course, it's the end of the world for them, because it is where the external source gets detonated. The external source gets cleaned up. because Sol begins to regulate it. So we are learning a lot. Okay, so the 7th of October 2025, in the frequency of the apparatus, we have in the negative, we have 118, you see? So, and in the wheat, the reading of the metric of the wheat, we have 585882. This is a date that takes us to the apparatus and the year of the solar code that contains the connection between the Julian and the Gregorian calendar, right? We're going to be seeing a lot of things going on in this October 7th of 2025, and we're going to be able to track them with all the things that we have been learning through LGC through all this time, right? Because we are approaching to we are finishing year 13 of the process, and we are approaching year 14. But to be able to begin with that year 14, we have to finish the 13, and 13 is the synchronization, right? The 13 spaces of the ring of fire. And what Alejandra has been showing is that we have been working with the synchronization where the unified field, the area of the unified field, is being included in that synchronization. So that's going to become more readable. We're going to be able to do solar sociology, not social sociology, but solar sociology. We're going to be able to track this whole situation in retrospective and explain to ourselves things according to the solar code and its stages of evolution. So what we have ahead of us is wonderful. How can we not be so happy? How can we not feel so proud of everything that we have been supporting? Because at the moment of revelation, it is the facts, it is the actions that speak, not the texts. The logic was provided previously, but in the revelation, plus the logic, we already have the glasses, right? And the magnifying glasses. So we don't need blames. We don't need culpa. We need the magnifying glass. Culpa, lupa. Remember that? Because everything is part of an extraordinary equation. So we are very happy about that. Now, this lab 17 has to do with the collective memory that the other has. The other one who is not me has, right? And how I am going to be synchronizing with the way that that other person is connecting or linking to that collective memory. How am I going to be synchronizing to the way the other person links to the collective memory or whatever collective memory the other person has? So she's saying that she personally has a really great challenge because she's traveling with two people, and she needs to have a very general language, because if she doesn't, she will not be able to communicate. So there is this effort of translating to general language, and this is part of lab 17, because she has to enter the stereotype that the other person is using to be able to link with the solar connection and show or evidence in some way that relationship. Okay, so it is a challenge for her too, because she has to place a value on that scale. So the time has come to translate all of this into the personal development. But notice that when Alejandra goes to the personal development, she reaches that like on year 13, 14, right? And everybody else begins on the personal development. She gets there last. This is because the solar development takes me away from society, because I'm going to pick up a signal of instruction that belongs to the universe and not to the university, right? Because it's the universe, the one that is educating us. So now we have to impregnate the universities of all of these updates. But these Gen Z, this whole Gen Z is the one that is going to be in charge of a big part of all of this. If not, it would be an impossible task for us. So the situation of linking to the stereotype, right? How we are connecting or linking to the stereotype. We enter into an articulation, right? This lab 17 is a previous step towards the value or the determination of the value, because then we have lap 18, which is lap 7 of the other. So this is about how I am going to construct a social octave. I can't construct a social octave if I am not including the value of someone else who isn't myself. Because I have to understand that what for me might be a value, for the other person, it might be an anti-value. So, but because all of this is not supported by me, it's supported by the earth, I can take my distance if I cannot have a relationship with that person because of the differences. I'm not the one that needs to support it, it is the earth, right? So the thing is that each person is going to be in their own algorithm, and every single person has to keep their own balance, right? And then the regulations of the frames are the ones that are going to be providing the interrelationships. So she's saying that what is coming is really, really beautiful, and it is very interesting to know or observe what the level of elegance or absence of elegance that the code will have. Because what she sees from antimatter, she thinks that is like really, really elegant. But sometimes when we translate that to the plane, we have dead humans, we have hurt people, and it doesn't sound elegant. But what we can say is that whatever happened in Nepal was very short, and then there was a frequency of order, right? So uh for us, for all of this to be able to be elegant, we have to pick up the signals. If we hadn't picked up these signals, it would have been way more catastrophic put into the collective. That's why Ale always said that reducing the symbolic scale is very, very important, because if we didn't do that, there would be no elegance in the moment of the uh execution of the code, right? So what would happen then? There would be a really elegant resurfacing of the planet, but there would be no people in it. Okay, only animals and plants as before. Okay, so for humans to be included in all of this, we have to assume our regulatory responsibility. So what she says is that, okay, if I have the power of interrupting a life cycle, whether it's plant, animal, or mineral, right? I have to be in charge, and I have to be responsible of the regulation of that cycle as well. Why? Because I can interrupt it. If I can interrupt it, if I can destroy it, then it is my responsibility to regulate it. And this goes to humans, because they only contemplate the economy at a human scale, but they don't contemplate the economy of all the other realms that compose the balance of the space that we inhabit. So if I can break the balance of a plant cycle or of an animal cycle, it means that I am responsible of keeping the balance of that cycle. It is common sense, nothing more. Can I break that balance? If the answer is yes, then I am the architect of that balance. So I am not only going to be focused on the human economic wishes. I also have to be interested in the infrastructure that supports and contains that. So the question is, can I break that balance? Then I am responsible. Now, if you ask a cat if a cat can break the balance of a plant or of an animal, the answer is no. So he's not responsible. The cat is not responsible. If you ask a dog about the same thing, he's not responsible. But we do mining, we work the land, we do all kinds of things, we manipulate things genetically. Okay, we can break many cycles, many different cycles, and then we don't become responsible of breaking them, right? So here she bases herself in Nepal. Gen C is becoming activated, and it's activating all the other codes of the earth, because they are the ones that are going to be putting up this banner out, right? That is the thing. When we're talking about I break it just because, then I go out and I repair it just because. And that's what they're doing, because they're choosing to do something, and then they're taking responsibility for that architecture and the consequences. So, okay, If you belong to the human species, it means that you have an extra access. You have a plus of an access. So if you have a plus of an access, you also have an extra responsibility. And Gen Z is going to be in charge of fulfilling that. Why? Because that's what they're here for. And if the solar code no longer has these holes, if everything we have been working on has been seen and has been repaired in the antimatter, then the execution of all of that is going to happen in a way as less aggressive as possible. And she's saying this because the credit and the symbolic scale is very broad. So, but the thing is that that's going to be regulated, and that's not that credit and the symbolic scale will not be so broad in the future. Another interesting thing is that quarantine 1-to-1, right, which is balance, has already provided indicators globally of this sprout, this spring sprout of everything that we have been describing so far. Because she's anticipating that it is the beginning of the activation of the Gen Z, as we call it socially. But for us, it is apparatus 500. So global quarantine 121, we're talking about equilibrio, equilibrium in Spanish, right? And that doesn't have to do with whether I am good person or bad person, because I can be as good or as bad as, necessary. Because what drives me is the consciousness of the state of the flow of signals, not the consciousness of value. Okay, this is something that Ale has been working on. The state of judgment of state and judgment of value. It is different because the value is going to be tending to crystallization. The state of judgment is going to tend to crystallize. The judgment of state will tend to regulate. Okay. Now, what happens if all of us are driven by the consciousness of the value, right? Everybody has different values and they are all dystopic. That's why we end up in a global disbalance. Now, if we regulate from the judgment of state of the flow of signals, then I can perceive my own value, I can perceive the other person's value, and I can create a regulation. I can anticipate because the judgment of state nourishes the antenna. Now, when the judgment of value is going to be inscribed, it's going to be inscribed more elegantly. It's not going to break. It's going to articulate because I am aware, I am conscious that socially compensations are being constructed all the time because we're talking about the unified field, and the unified field regulates all the time. So stereotypes start to be less strong stereotypes because here the infrastructure that is coming through the architectures of apparatuses 500, we are talking about the architects of the universe in little vases of babies, little vases of teenagers, little vases of young people that we can see that they are not very much interested in history. Why? Because they are arriving from an infrastructure where the future reconverts and transforms the past with new meanings and perspectives. So that's why we're going to be more and more familiar as time goes by between matter and antimatter. Our regulations, our main identity slowly is going to be being stored primordially in the antimatter and secondarily in the matter, right? And because my material identity comes to be secondary, it doesn't depend on stereotypes anymore. It used to depend on stereotypes because my primary identity was illusory, like it was fakely physical. It was third dimensional. So I was depending on stereotypes. That's why these things with like who is more clever or more wickedly clever and all of that, that's going to be out of fashion soon. We are going to a new era that is going to be much more interesting. So she's saying that she's really happy about that. The day they recorded this program, it was day 38 of Global Quarantine 121. we are reading an octave that brings balance. Okay, perfect. On the next day, the 15th of September, we are talking about an update of that equilibrium because it's the day 39. So we're going to see how that goes, how that is documented at a social scale. Okay, so the unified field is going to tend to a regulation. That's like its main function is to regulate. That is why the occurrences of all the contents will be tending to be convergent, when before they tended to be divergent. Now the occurrences of all the little humans that we are all in there, we are gonna move towards a more convergent situation. And she's talking about the civil level, okay? And we are observing how this is beginning in Asia. Okay, let's give them space because we are talking about the very own architects of the universe. Wow. One second. Now, the difference between behind and forward and up and down, right? Okay. When we're saying up, there is no future. We're talking about present. And there we have the connection of the memory with the memory, and that has to do with down. The connection with the memory is down. Up, that's it, right? There's nothing. It's flow of signals. The third dimensional vehicle needs a unit of memory. The observer is going to take an unprecedented reading of that past, and that's going to become a capital on which we can generate, on which we can anchor to, right? But that anchor has to do with the present reinterpreting the past. Therefore, it is present, it is not the past. What happens is that that present shares an interaction with the collective memory unit. But this only can happen if the octave is being managed by the architect, not by the stereotype, okay? Where we have up and down, and we have a connection with the collective memory unit. We have the flow of signals, and the observer is able to reinterpret the past through the present. Now, if the person only lives and is here for a human experience, then their octave is going to be managed by the collective memory. But a particle that is responsible of a space-temporal consciousness that selects a specific solar membrane to trace a materialization that he's going to be in charge of, we're talking about a different thing. We're talking about a non-human factor that creates the opportunity so that later a human range can come and experience it. So she says, I am doing simultaneously all of these things because you can be the actor and you can be the author too. But not everybody is an actor and an author simultaneously, because what they do is they follow pre-established scripts. The thing is that in the past, the only thing we had was these pre-established scripts, and that was it. Now that's an option, but that's not the only thing. And every time the criteria are going to be much more independent and more autonomous, because the interconnection is going to be more multipolar. So she's saying that she has no problem, no conflict with the word multipolar because she's executing that all the time. She can have readings that can go back and forth in the calendar and they continue to be convergent, because we are not talking about human experiences. We are talking about space-temporal consciousness, which is what needs an argument to provide a base so that a destiny can be constructed. But that destiny will be framed within a collective memory unit. So everything is related. So the thing is that when we don't leave any spaces empty, we are able to route each and every scale. Now we're talking about psychic structure, which is something that lies between the magma, the center of the earth, and the ionosphere. And that is what we call the framework contract. And in the middle, we find these contents. Now, if the personal scale only cares about the contents, it doesn't see the rest. But if its destiny is traced by everything that is not the content, then the container is able to limit, save, protect, and anticipate the containers. Okay, so here she has an example for that. We have a bakery, and it has really refined flour, and we love all these pastries, right? But for us to be able to have that pastry, previous to that, there is this whole process that is connected to nature and all the plant realm. We have the plant, we have the processing of the product, all the way, all this impressive infrastructure, all the way until we finally have that refined flour to finally make that pastry. The thing is that if I only focus on the final product, then I cannot see what takes it there. So I really like pastries, I really like bakeries, but I want to become a millionaire through real estate. So I break everything so that I can get rich with real estate. But then I also want pastries, okay? That's a contradiction. Human economy breaks and destroys every other economy that contains the human economy. So human appetites tend to infinity if they don't have regulations and the regulatory frames, if they don't have consciousness of the frames. That's why we have all these contradictions. So it's like saying, I love eggs and I have eggs for breakfast every day, but I hate chicken. So kill them all because they are dirty. They are gross, kill them all, but I love eggs. So we only focus on human economy, human economy. If the stock market is up, if the stock market is down, I am not looking at the rest of the economies that maintain the human economy, because I am only focused on whether the stock market goes up and down, whether I'm becoming a millionaire or not. So I break balance. I don't care about anything because the only thing I care about is the materialization of my fantasy. I don't care what I break in the middle. Okay, that's what I'm just talking about. Then, when all of those balances are broken, I am the last person that figures this thing out because I have so much money, but then I have nothing to buy, right? And then I get killed by a tsunami. So the bottom line is, if I can destroy a balance because I am responsible, that's it. Common sense. Okay, now we're going to talk about the memory of the container. If something is recorded in the memory of the container, the collective memory, this is a reading that is oriented to the fourth plane. The fourth plane needs to record the destiny in the collective memory so that later the meaning doesn't break. We need to keep a structure of meaning in the sequence of the third dimension. That's why there is a destiny that is pre-recorded in the collective memory. That's what we call that. Now, me as a container, as a particular person is not the collective memory. A particular person is oriented according to the present. In the infrastructure of the fourth plane, it's different because it's going to be the argument of the third dimension, the one that is going to be previously recorded in the memory unit of the earth. So it's going to be under that collective memory, because there we're talking about collective memory. I'm not talking about the person, because the person gets oriented through the present. Now, the NO cardinality in relation to the collective memory unit is the judicial order. Remember the legitimate order and the judicial order. So the NO cardinality in relation to the collective memory unit is the judicial order, because that order does not need an architect. A human person architect does not need a judicial order. Now, a collective space that's going to have an NO cardinality it's gonna need a judicial order because it's a collective of particles that make up a star from which they're gonna have a space of materialization, right? So, but that means that its immaterial aspect is gonna need to keep the regulation of that material space through a judicial order. So that judicial order is needed by the container because it has a collective status, right? So for the unified field, NO is a judicial order and NE is a financial order. So okay, so that under responds to the collective memory because that is a future that is previously recorded in the collective memory. And that has to do with the memory of Earth. It is the Earth, it is not Alejandra. And Alejandra links to a specific frequency in a route inside there. But it's gonna link according to its own, bias, according to its own to her own relative position in the personal scale. So each person has a particular perspective, and all of our readings are going to be divergent. But if we are reading one single unit of memory, sharing it, yeah, but what changes are the interpreters, right? So that's where we have the multipolar world. But the frames are containers, okay? So Alejandra's just saying that she's very satisfied, she's very happy. She sees everything very positive. She's also very happy that things are very much easier to transfer. There's new people coming too, but obviously the people that maintain the resonance all like from the beginning or from years, we have been very attentive to the creation of concepts, and we have a very more oriented tracking. Other people have a more intuitive approach, or more internal, or more visceral, or more from the side of resistance. But she's saying that she thinks that resistance will also be having an impact by this transformation. So this situation that is happening in Nepal, the restructuring of the balance, what happened in Nepal and the restructuring of the balance happened in 48 hours. So that is very elegant. It didn't take 5 generations for balance to be found. It took hours. So yes, that is very elegant. It means that the capacity of destroying something is improving. Like there is more capacity of improvement. So these are the principles of the regulation of the octave. So these young people are executing through what is symbolic, and it's not very orderly, but that's it. So yeah, that is like everything, like the reasoning that she had to go through to find October 7th. And it's all through LGC, just hard LGC. And this is solar sociology. And we are following very strict algorithms. Okay, and we saw this in the last lab with Mendeleev's occurrence and the relation of the Julian and the Gregorian calendar and Alcides Carrion. So we are observing that there are no personal restrictions that can limit the architects that are of a scale that has nothing to do with the personal area. So that would be all for Red 144. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I'll see you in the review meeting, okay? Goodbye.